The judge laughed at the teen. Seconds later, he was speechless. Welcome to Moral Mirror. The courtroom was filled with the quiet rustle of papers and the low murmurs of an audience that had clearly already made up its mind. Journalists scribbled notes. Lawyers checked their phones. And at the center of it all, standing alone in front of the defense table, was a teenager in jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. His name was Malik Thompson, 17 years old, skinny, and silent. But his eyes were focused, observing, calculating. At the bench sat Judge Harold Reynolds, a man known across the county for his strict rulings and even stricter attitude. With his graying hair slicked back and his black robe neatly pressed, Judge Reynolds exuded authority. His courtroom was his kingdom, and he did not like surprises. Today, he was about to get the biggest one of his career. "Where is your attorney?" Judge Reynolds asked, not even looking directly at Malik at first. "I'll be representing myself, Your Honor," Malik said with a respectful but firm voice. The room fell silent for a moment, like it didn't register. Then came the laughs. A few giggles from the back row. A smirk from the prosecutor's table. Even a bailiff raised an eyebrow. Judge Reynolds leaned forward slowly, staring at Malik as if trying to decide whether this was a prank. "Excuse me," he said. "I'll be defending myself in this case," Malik repeated, holding up a folder filled with typed papers and handwritten notes. The judge chuckled, not kindly. "This isn't a school project, young man. You're facing federal charges of cybercrime. Do you even know what you're doing?" "Yes, sir," Malik replied calmly. "I've read the charges and the case file thoroughly. I'm prepared." Now the snickering turned into full-on whispers. Some even shook their heads. Reporters scribbled Malik's name on their notepads, preparing headlines that would mock this bold, foolish move. A teenager representing himself? In federal court? It was unheard of. Judge Reynolds sat back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Well," he said slowly, clearly amused, "if you're intent on embarrassing yourself, I won't stop you. Just don't say I didn't warn you." Malik didn't flinch. He opened his folder and carefully laid out his documents, labeled tabs, highlighted sections of law, and even printed case studies. Judge Reynolds rolled his eyes. "Prosecution, are you ready?" The district attorney, Mr. Barnett, smirked as he stood. "Ready, Your Honor. Though I must admit, I didn't prepare for a high school debate." The courtroom laughed again, but Malik didn't respond. He stared at the prosecutor silently, like a chess player watching an opponent make their first mistake. Just 3 days earlier, Malik had been sitting in his high school computer lab, working on a group coding project. He was quiet, focused, and always stayed after class to help his teacher troubleshoot bugs in the school's outdated system. So when the school's database was suddenly hacked, grades changed, emails leaked, and a fake school-wide message sent out, it didn't take long for fingers to point in his direction. He was the tech kid, always on a laptop, always a step ahead of everyone else. That made him suspicious. And just like that, without hard evidence, the school board contacted the police. They traced the incident to an IP address near Malik's home. The next morning, officers knocked on the door. They didn't ask many questions. They cuffed him on the front porch while his mother, Angela, stood frozen in disbelief. It happened fast, too fast, and Malik knew something was off. At the holding center, they offered him a public defender. But he declined, not out of arrogance, but because he knew he could do better. He had spent years preparing for a moment like this. Back in the courtroom, Judge Reynolds listened as the prosecution began to speak. "Your Honor," Mr. Barnett said, "we intend to prove that Mr. Thompson here accessed the school's internal network without permission, manipulated grade data, and sent out a disruptive false announcement through the school's emergency alert system. All signs point to him. IP logs. Timing. Motive." "Motive?" Malik interrupted politely. "I'd like to hear that part." Barnett raised an eyebrow. He was frustrated with the school administration. His GPA dropped after a recent exam, and he had publicly complained about unfair grading. Malik nodded slowly, then stepped forward. "Permission to address the court, Your Honor." Judge Reynolds motioned lazily with his hand. "Proceed, Mr. Thompson." Malik turned toward the jury and began to speak. Not nervously, not defensively, but like someone who had done this 100 times before. "My name is Malik Thompson. I am a high school senior, and yes, I'm good with computers. But being good at something doesn't make me guilty of abusing it. The IP address in question? It was traced to my neighbor's unprotected Wi-Fi. I submitted evidence that shows my devices weren't active during the breach. Judge Reynolds raised his head slightly, interested for the first time. I've also submitted a detailed report on the flaws in the school's firewall, Malik continued, holding up a second folder. A report I gave to the administration 3 weeks before the incident. They ignored it. The courtroom quieted. The smirks faded. Reporters stopped writing and just listened. Furthermore, Malik said, I have access logs and metadata that show the breach was made using a device that doesn't belong to me. I filed a subpoena request for surveillance footage from a nearby cafe where another student, one who recently asked me for help hacking grades, was seen that morning. Judge Reynolds leaned forward. Mr. Barnett looked uncomfortable. Malik walked back to his table and sat down. The judge cleared his throat. Mr. Thompson, your objections and responses are surprisingly well organized. Thank you, Your Honor. And you're how old again? 17. Reynolds stared at him for a long moment, then glanced down at the paperwork. His face slowly changed, from amused to curious to impressed. For the first time, there were no chuckles, no whispers, just silence. Because now, the courtroom knew, this wasn't some punk kid trying to act smart. This was someone who might actually be smarter than everyone else in the room. The courtroom had shifted. Just 15 minutes ago, Malik Thompson had been the punchline of every side glance, every whisper, every sneer. But now, people were starting to lean forward in their seats. Pens stopped moving. Even Judge Reynolds, known for being gruff and unshakable, had paused. His eyes weren't full of mockery anymore. They were full of interest. Malik sat calmly at the defense table, flipping through his notes, waiting for the next move like a chess player who had already seen 10 moves ahead. Mr. Barnett, the prosecutor, was clearly rattled. His opening remarks were rushed now, missing the usual confidence. In addition to the digital evidence, Barnett said, fumbling with a stack of papers, we also have testimony from school staff who witnessed Mr. Thompson expressing frustration towards school administration in the weeks leading up to the incident. Malik stood up. Objection, Your Honor. That's hearsay without factual backing. Judge Reynolds raised an eyebrow. Sustained. Whispers rippled through the courtroom again, but this time they weren't mocking. They were curious, amazed. Mr. Barnett tried to recover. The point remains, Your Honor. The student had motive, access, and the technical knowledge to improve the school's broken system, not break it, Malik cut in. If you'll allow, I'd like to present a timeline of my documented attempts to help the administration fix their vulnerabilities. Go ahead, Judge Reynolds nodded. Malik wheeled a small whiteboard to the center of the courtroom. He pulled out a marker and, without notes, began mapping out exact dates, emails, school reports, even responses from staff, proving he had tried to warn them about the system being insecure. I sent my first report on January 3rd, Malik explained, writing the date. No response. On January 15th, I followed up with screenshots. Again, ignored. February 2nd, I submitted a copy through my counselor. Still nothing. The audience was riveted. Finally, he said, turning around, on March 12th, the breach occurred. Right after I refused to help another student who offered me money to fix his GPA. I reported that student to the school board, but guess what? No record was kept. Not even an investigation. Malik looked toward the jury. I'm not a criminal. I'm a warning system that everyone ignored. Even Judge Reynolds sat back, visibly stunned. What people didn't know about Malik was that he had grown up studying people just as much as he had studied books. Raised by his mother, Angela, a hardworking legal assistant who brought home case files instead of bedtime stories. Malik had spent much of his childhood absorbing legal arguments, watching depositions online, and mastering the rhythm of courtroom dialogue. When other kids were playing video games, Malik was watching Supreme Court hearings. When most teenagers were on TikTok, Malik was studying contract law and reading up on digital forensics. It wasn't just a hobby. It was an obsession. He didn't just want to understand the law. He wanted to beat it, not to escape punishment, but to prove that the system could be outsmarted, even by someone it never expected to succeed. Malik didn't just memorize the rules. He understood their spirit. He knew that truth wasn't always the loudest voice in the room. It was the most prepared. Back in court, Judge Reynolds leaned forward again. "Mr. Thompson, you mentioned a student who tried to bribe you. Do you have any evidence that supports that claim?" "I do, Your Honor," Malik replied, sliding a printed email onto the exhibit table. An email thread from the student, which includes a digital fingerprint. I cross-referenced it with the metadata from the device used in the hack. The timestamps match. I've also sent a request to the cafe's manager for surveillance footage. If granted, I'll submit it to the court immediately. Judge Reynolds blinked slowly. "That's thorough." Malik nodded. "And one more thing, Your Honor. I'd like to challenge the IP evidence. The school's report fails to account for open Wi-Fi networks in the surrounding area. According to FCC guidelines, unsecured networks are highly susceptible to IP spoofing. I conducted a digital test that showed at least 3 such vulnerable connections near my address." Barnett jumped up. "Your Honor, this is speculative." "No," Reynolds said firmly. "This is smart and relevant." Overruled. The courtroom was stunned into silence again. No one was laughing now. After a short recess, Judge Reynolds returned with a tone that was different from before. Not sharp, not sarcastic. Something closer to curious respect. "Mr. Thompson," he began, "it's not often I say this, but your handling of this case is one of the most articulate and well-researched I've seen from anyone your age or several years older. Thank you, Your Honor. You do understand what's at stake here, right? This isn't just an exercise. If you're wrong, the consequences are serious." "I understand," Malik replied. "But if I let someone else speak for me, someone who doesn't know what I know, they'll never believe me. This isn't just about me. It's about every kid who gets accused just because they're different, or smarter, or quiet, or not what people expect." The judge leaned back, stroking his chin. It was in that moment the entire courtroom realized something. Malik wasn't just defending himself from a cybercrime charge. He was defending his identity, his intelligence, his right to be taken seriously. A woman in the audience, who had previously rolled her eyes at the start of the hearing, whispered to her friend, "Who is this kid?" The answer? Malik Thompson wasn't just a teenager on trial. He was the beginning of a revolution in the courtroom. The next morning, the courthouse was packed. Word had spread like wildfire. A 17-year-old was defending himself against federal cybercrime charges, and he was winning. Social media lit up with hashtags like #JusticeForMalik and #TeenLawGenius. News outlets gathered outside the building. Reporters held microphones, trying to catch a glimpse of the boy who had silenced an entire courtroom. But inside, things weren't as inspiring as they seemed, because someone was trying to shut Malik down. It started with a missing flash drive. Malik arrived early that morning, as he had every day of the trial. He pulled out his materials, his folders, highlighters, written arguments, but his red flash drive, the one containing crucial metadata logs, emails, and server logs, was gone. Vanished. He searched his backpack, his pockets, the folder where he always kept it. Nothing. Panic set in, but only for a moment. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and reminded himself, "Stay focused. You're not here to panic. You're here to prove." He still had printed copies of most of the data, and, thankfully, the surveillance footage from the cafe had just been emailed to the court clerk the night before. But the loss of that drive? That was intentional. Someone was scared. As the courtroom filled up, Judge Reynolds entered with a noticeably more serious tone. He sat down, nodded briefly, and motioned for the proceedings to begin. Malik stood up. "Your Honor," he said, "I'd like to formally submit the cafe surveillance footage as evidence. It shows the student I previously named, Logan McBride, using a laptop in the cafe at 6:48 a.m., the same time the school system was breached." He handed the USB to the bailiff, who inserted it into the court monitor. Footage appeared on the screen. It was crystal clear. Logan, typing rapidly on a laptop. The timestamp matched the digital intrusion. In the background, another student could be seen walking past, confirming the date. The courtroom was silent. Even the prosecutor, Mr. Barnett, had no objections. He just sat there, frozen, as if watching the case slip through his fingers. But Judge Reynolds wasn't done. "Mr. Barnett," the judge said, turning to the DA, "do you still wish to proceed with your claim that Mr. Thompson was the one who committed the breach?" Barnett shifted awkwardly. We may need to reconsider the digital evidence, Your Honor." "Reconsider?" Reynolds leaned forward. "You built your entire case around that evidence. And now it appears the defendant not only discredits it, but presents stronger, more precise data than your team." Barnett's lips tightened. That's when Malik stood again. "If I may, Your Honor," he said, "I also need to report that my red flash drive, containing all my source data, logs, and expert statements, went missing from my bag last night. I had it during recess. It was gone when I returned home." The room gasped. Judge Reynolds narrowed his eyes. "Are you suggesting someone tampered with your evidence?" "I can't say for sure," Malik replied, choosing his words carefully. "But it's unlikely I lost it. I keep it with me at all times. I have no enemies, except maybe the truth." The statement hit like thunder. Even some jurors looked shaken. After a pause, Judge Reynolds cleared his throat. "We will investigate this matter. If there has been any interference in this case, intentional or otherwise, it will be dealt with accordingly." The judge then addressed the entire courtroom. "This young man has demonstrated a level of legal understanding and composure that I rarely see, even from seasoned attorneys. I urge everyone in this room to remember, justice is not about age, appearance, or assumption. It is about truth, and we're finally getting to it." The tension was thick. Malik sat down, his face unreadable. He wasn't celebrating yet, because deep down, he knew something still wasn't right. That evening, as Malik and his mom Angela walked back to their apartment, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're doing something bigger than winning a case," she said. "You're making people think. That's power, baby." "I know," Malik replied softly, "but I think someone's watching me. Someone who doesn't want this case to end the way it should." Angela stopped walking. "What do you mean?" He explained the missing flash drive again, then added something he hadn't told the court. On his way to the courthouse that morning, he'd noticed a black SUV parked near his street. It wasn't familiar. No plates he recognized. And later, while reviewing the security footage at the cafe, he noticed the same SUV parked nearby in the background. Coincidence? Maybe. But Malik didn't believe in coincidences anymore. The next day, the courtroom was quieter, more serious. The media had grown louder outside, but inside, the tone had changed. No more snickering. No more condescending looks. Malik was no longer the underdog. He was the voice of reason, and the jury was listening. But the pressure was building. Mr. Barnett, clearly shaken, requested a recess to re-examine the evidence, something almost unheard of at this stage. Judge Reynolds granted it, noting that the DA's office needed to re-evaluate their position based on new, compelling information. Malik knew what that meant. They were preparing to fold. But that didn't mean he was safe. After court let out, a reporter stopped Malik outside the courthouse. "You're making headlines, Malik. How does it feel to be the kid who's outsmarting the justice system?" He smiled slightly. "I'm not trying to outsmart it. I'm trying to show people how broken it is when it refuses to listen." That night, Angela got a knock on the door. It was a private courier. He handed her a sealed envelope. No name, no return address. Inside, the red flash drive. It was scratched up but still intact. Who returned it? Why now? Malik plugged it into his computer carefully, scanned it for malware, then opened the folder. Everything was still there, unchanged, but someone wanted him to know they had it. It was a warning, and Malik took the message clearly. "You're good, but don't go too far." Too late. He was already all in. Day 4 of the trial. The courtroom was no longer filled with doubters. It was filled with believers. Malik Thompson, the 17-year-old prodigy defending himself in a federal cybercrime case, had transformed from the laughingstock to the courtroom lion. His calm demeanor, razor-sharp logic, and surgical takedown of the prosecution's evidence had left even the judge impressed. But as the final day approached, tension wrapped the room like a coiled spring. Everyone expected a conclusion. What they didn't expect was a bombshell. Malik stood and addressed the court. "Your Honor," he began, before we continue with closing arguments, I'd like to call a surprise witness. Judge Reynolds looked surprised. You're calling a witness at this stage? Yes, sir, Malik replied. I believe the court deserves the full truth. Barnett objected immediately. This is highly irregular. The defense never submitted a witness list. But the judge waved his hand. Let's hear who it is first. Malik turned toward the back of the room. The door opened, and in walked Mr. Henry Sharp, the school district's IT manager. A hush swept the courtroom. Even Barnett looked stunned. Sharp, an older man with tired eyes and a nervous shuffle, sat down at the witness stand. He adjusted the mic. Malik began. Mr. Sharp, are you responsible for maintaining the school's network infrastructure? Yes, Sharp replied, clearing his throat. For the past 7 years. Were you aware of any vulnerabilities in the school's firewall before the data breach occurred? Sharp hesitated. Yes, we were aware. I had received reports. Malik held up a printed email, including this one, from me, dated a month before the attack. Sharp blinked. That's correct. So you confirm that I warned the administration before the attack occurred? Yes. The room tensed. And did the school take any action on my warning? No, Sharp admitted, looking ashamed. It was ignored. Budget constraints, they said. And finally, Malik said, walking slowly in front of the jury, are you aware of any other students who accessed administrator-level devices during the week of the breach? Sharp swallowed hard. Yes. Who? Sharp looked down. Logan McBride. Gasps erupted across the courtroom. Judge Reynolds banged his gavel. Order. Barnett stood up, flustered. Your Honor, this is completely unverified. It is verified, Malik interrupted. As of last night, I recovered my missing flash drive, containing admin login logs showing Logan's credentials being used from an off-site IP address. The same day, same time, same breach. He turned toward the projector and displayed the logs on screen. Judge Reynolds leaned forward, peering at the evidence. Mr. Barnett, he said calmly, do you have any counter to this? Barnett stood in silence. No, Your Honor. Malik walked to the center of the courtroom. This entire case was built on assumptions. Assumptions that because I'm young, because I'm tech-savvy, because I don't fit the mold, I must be guilty. No one bothered to question the evidence. They just went with the easy answer. He paused, letting the silence carry weight. I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to show that justice doesn't belong to those who shout the loudest. It belongs to those who tell the truth, even when no one wants to hear it. You could hear a pin drop. Judge Reynolds looked at Malik like he was seeing him for the first time. Mr. Thompson, he said slowly, your cross-examinations have been sharp. Your evidence, compelling. Your conduct, professional. You've presented your case with clarity, composure, and maturity far beyond your years. Malik nodded respectfully. I've seen many attorneys, the judge added, who could learn a thing or two from how you've handled this trial. Barnett lowered his head. It was over, and everyone knew it. After a short recess, the jury returned. The foreperson stood. In the case of Estate versus Malik Thompson, we find the defendant not guilty on all charges. The room erupted in applause. Malik didn't smile. Not right away. He turned toward his mother, Angela, sitting quietly in the second row. She had tears in her eyes, tears of relief, pride, and disbelief. He finally smiled. He had done it. He didn't just win his case. He shattered expectations. But just as Malik was gathering his papers, something unusual happened. Judge Reynolds spoke again. One more thing, Mr. Thompson. May I have a word with you? Privately. In chambers. Malik looked at his mom. She nodded. Moments later, in the judge's office, Judge Reynolds poured himself a glass of water and leaned on the edge of his desk. You know, when I first saw you walk into that courtroom, I thought it was a stunt. I thought you were wasting my time. But you proved me wrong. Spectacularly. Malik nodded. Thank you, sir. The judge looked over his glasses. Do you want to be a lawyer, Malik? I want to be more than that, Malik said. I want to fix what's broken in the system. Judge Reynolds smiled, for the first time all week. I think you just started. The courtroom emptied slowly, but Malik stayed behind. He stood near the defense table, running his fingers along the wood where he had sat for the longest, most intense 4 days of his life. Everyone else had left. The reporters, the jury, the prosecution. But Malik wasn't ready to walk out just yet. This wasn't just the place where he defended himself. It was the place where he proved he belonged. His mother stepped beside him, smiling through misty eyes. "You didn't just win, Malik," she whispered. "You changed the room." He looked at her and nodded. "I want to change more than just the room," he said quietly. "I want to change the system." Outside, a crowd of reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Cameras flashed. Microphones pushed forward. Voices shouted over each other. "Malik, are you planning to become a lawyer? What advice do you have for young people like you? Do you think you'll ever work with the judge again?" The attention was overwhelming, but Malik stood tall. He hadn't come this far to shrink now. "I'm not a genius," he began, speaking calmly but with unmistakable authority. "I'm not a miracle. I'm just a kid who read the rules, because I didn't have the luxury of ignoring them. I stood up because I didn't have a choice. But now, I choose to stand up for others." He paused, then added, "There are so many kids out there, quiet, smart, overlooked just like me. But they never get to speak. So I'm going to keep speaking for them, until everyone's voice matters." The crowd went silent, the cameras still rolling, capturing the moment. It wasn't a speech. It was a promise. In the weeks that followed, Malik's story exploded across the internet. News anchors called him the teenage courtroom warrior. Memes popped up showing Malik with a judge's gavel and captions like "Judge this." Interviews poured in from podcasts, radio shows, and late-night talk shows. Ivy League colleges that once ignored his scholarship essays were now calling him personally. Law firms offered him internships. One nonprofit even offered him a full ride to law school. But Malik turned most of it down. He wasn't interested in fame or riding a headline wave. He had something bigger in mind. Quietly, from his bedroom, he launched a YouTube channel called Laws of the Underdog. His mission? To break down the legal system in a way kids and teens could understand. No boring lectures. No complicated jargon. Just real talk from someone who'd been through it. His first video, "How to Speak in Court When Nobody Believes You," hit 2 million views in less than 2 weeks. Comments flooded in from teenagers saying, "I needed this and I wish I saw this a year ago." In his second video, "What to Do When You're Falsely Accused," he outlined every step he took, from documenting timelines to requesting digital records. Teachers started showing his videos in class. Parents messaged him for advice. Even some public defenders reached out asking if they could share his videos with their young clients. Meanwhile, the boy who once stood alone in court became a community leader. He started weekly live streams, inviting legal experts, former public defenders, and youth advocates to talk about real-life scenarios. He didn't claim to have all the answers, but he asked the right questions. That was his power. Not just what he knew, but how he helped others ask why. And then came the email. It was from Judge Harold Reynolds. A formal invitation. "Would you be willing," the judge wrote, "to speak at the annual Youth Justice Summit next month? Your insights could help us better understand how to rebuild trust with our younger citizens." Malik smiled when he read it. The same judge who once mocked him now respected him. At the summit, Malik took the stage in a navy blue suit, still without a tie. He spoke not just about his case, but about what it felt like to be misjudged before opening his mouth. He talked about how bias hides in silence, how the system favors the familiar, and how young people like him often get ignored simply because they don't look like lawyers. When he finished, the room gave him a standing ovation. Later that evening, as he walked to the train station with his mom, she turned to him and said, "You were meant for this, you know. Not just the courtroom, the movement." Malik looked up at the night sky and nodded. "It's not just about proving I was innocent," he said. "It's about making sure the next kid doesn't have to fight alone." Back at home, Malik hung his court badge on his bedroom wall, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of the days when he was underestimated, of the silence he turned into power, and of the truth he forced the world to hear. Because Malik Thompson wasn't just a teenager who defended himself in court. He became something much greater, a mirror for justice, a voice for the unheard, and a symbol of what happens when courage meets preparation and refuses to stay quiet.